Dr. Aggarwal is a cardiologist at Mayo, Rochester. Again, I can't wait to meet you in person. Dr. Aggarwal specializes in non-invasive advanced multimodality cardiovascular imaging. She's one of the nationally recognized experts in sex differences in cardiac disease. She published a book that Jesse just spoke about the pathophysiology and presentation, diagnosis, and management of these sex differences last year. Dr. Aggarwal is a true scholar. She's published multiple manuscripts and book chapters. She's on the editorial board for the Journal of Nuclear Cardiology. She very frequently participates in many cardiology scientific committees. Dr. Aggarwal is very passionate about medical education and social media. We're very proud and excited that you agreed to talk to us today about the relevance of social media for academic promotion. Once more, thank you so much for being here with us tonight, Dr. Aggarwal.
Thank you, Theo, for that beautiful, oh my God, humbling introduction. Thank you. I think most of you don't want to hear me talk for the whole hour, and you probably don't want to see my face the whole time. So what I did do was create a few slides, maybe 10 minutes worth, that just kind of lays out how social media got me to where I am, and then we can open the floor to any questions. If that's okay, can I share my screen?
It's absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for preparing the slideshow for us.
All right, so you should be able to see my screen, but not the next slide. Does that everything look okay? Yeah, perfect.
Yep. Thanks.
So harnessing the power of social media. So for me, it was actually ASNIC 2018. I got paired with two of my ideals, Leslie Shaw and Jennifer Miras, pictured here. And I was told, oh, you need to do something in this session. You're moderating it. And I emailed Jennifer, what do you need me to do? She sent me a 3-line email. I wasn't Twitterish. It was not in English. I did not even have a Twitter account at this point. I'm like, I called a good friend. I'm like, can you translate? What does she need me to do here? What the heck is going on? And turns out she was expecting me to create an account and tweet live. And oh, it gets better. This whole thing was in 3 weeks. So in 3 weeks, I suddenly had to sort of project that I knew something about Twitter. So this was at ASNIC 2018. I was forced onto Twitter, as I call it. And I decided, like most things in life, I listened to Dr. Yoda, and he says, try not, do or do not. There is no try. So I said, we're going to go in full force. Oops, sorry. I'm starting at the very bottom where I have no account. I am probably in denial because I don't know what I don't know. And I know I need to progress. So over the next 3 weeks, I got addicted to Twitter. I was literally on Twitter till like 2 or 3 in the morning trying to figure out how this thing works and how does one tweet. And then what I learned in the process was it's all about education. It helps me with collaboration, with dissemination, and with leadership opportunities. So I'll kind of go through each of those bullets rather briefly. Starting with education. Prior to joining Twitter, I'm a multimodality imager with training in CT, MR, echo, and nuclear, and obviously general cardiology and women's heart disease. And I had competing time commitment, couldn't attend every single conference. And this was obviously pre-pandemic, so the virtual concept did not exist. And it was hard to keep up with journals and guidelines. I always felt like I was falling behind, and textbooks were outdated. So it was like, I'm always behind no matter what I do. And then comes along this Twitter where everything is broken down into 280 character summaries. And I could obviously, once I knew this article was out, I, for the most part, could just skim the 280 character tweet. But sometimes, if I felt the need, I could do a deeper dive. And so you get the tweets, tutorials, the polls, the journal clubs, and that was game changing in terms of being able to keep up with all the education I was expected to do. And like I said, with guidelines and trials, again, you got nice nugget sized summaries. And if I felt the need, I could always go back to the actual guideline and do a deeper dive. And to me, the power of education, I don't need to tell this crowd because you guys have been doing an incredible job with all the cardio nerds rounds and things that you post on Twitter. I am one of your followers, so it is amazing to see everything you guys post. It is uh, truly inspiring to see that our medical students who are so far, Chelsea, kudos to you, as I was saying earlier, that you are joining at this stage, know what you want to do, and putting in all that effort. Truly incredible. And it's a great place for collaboration. I've met many of you itself on Twitter. I know Amit and Dan, I've met you through Twitter in the past before I met in real life. And it's a great place to put those collaborations to work. So as an example, we came up with this idea for social media in the era of COVID-19 during the pandemic. The idea obviously came from social media, the collaboration, each of those people, Mamas and Mirvat Alasna, I met on Twitter. The experiment or the concept was from Twitter. We published it online and then disseminated it through Twitter as well. And the other part of collaboration is not just for the academic work, but what we call as autoraft. So I have a WhatsApp group. This is a group of typically female cardiologists, where we often just text each other about, our flowers look pretty, or when we were going through the pandemic, we were all having a rough time and some of our emotions. Or sometimes it's, hey, did you see this article on cardio obstetrics? It could be a whole gamut of things, whatever people are going through. For some, it was kids. For some, it was grandkids. For sometimes it's, I'm just having a really rough day and I just want to let it out. And we're there to support each other. We're there to help keep each other afloat, just like an auto raft would do. And I met most of these people originally on Twitter. And it's a great place to disseminate some of those publications. So I do have some publications pertaining to sex differences in heart disease, heart centers of women. And each of those groups, most of the people that I've worked with, I'd kind of met in some form or shape, either through social media. And then the other thing was also through professional societies. To me, the professional societies, that Twitter wasn't as rampant, I guess, when I was growing up, which kind of tells my age a little bit. But Twitter and social media in many ways is an extension of those professional societies. When we go to these professional societies, it is key to network. And none of these publications would have happened if we hadn't just gotten together and said, hey, we're all passionate about this. Let's put our heads together and come up with a few publications. So even though in 2018, I started with that level of denial, at some point I realized I had gone on, made the switch in 6 months, moved to the conscious, competent person. I was at the Cool People Club. And the Journal of Nuclear Cardiology's editor, Dr. Iskandrian at the time, approached me and said, hey, how would you like to be an associate editor and be the social media editor for the journal? So that was my first opportunity. We very quickly launched GNC Twitter account, which I hope most of you are following. And we, as a result, every so often, we've got a team of assistant social media editors. And we create these tweets and go through a scientific article and put it out. And I'm going to put a nice little plug in and say that we are now looking for new assistant social media editors for JNC. The qualifications are either a trained or early career, somebody who's passionate about nuclear cardiology, versed in social media, which is all of you. So if any of you are interested or know of anybody that is, just email me or message me through Twitter, and we can get you started. In addition to my role as the GNC social media editor, more or less around the same time, I got appointed as the social media track chair for ASNIC, American Society of Nuclear Cardiology scientific meeting for both 2019, which was its inaugural year, as well as for 2020. Here's some of the numbers for ASNIC 2020, where prior to this, we didn't really have much of an account or social media presence, and quickly skyrocketed to 13 million impressions during that meeting. For 20, I think 19 or 20, I forget, I think 19, I was also the social media editor, or no, it's not editor. I was the social media track chair also for SCMR. So everything kind of just happened in parallel where I was doing it for ASNIC, doing it for SCMR, sort of using what I learned through one position onto the next and just doing parallel. And then of all the work I was doing, I was able to put those into publications. So I was able to do some publications related to my GNC work, with some publications regarding the ASNIC 2019 and 2020 experience, for SCMR 2020 and 21. And then I talked about the COVID experience already. And then similar time frame, ACC 2018, I heard that one of the senior people in the group, we were just meeting for breakfast. This was at ACC 2018, had an opportunity, was invited by Elsevier to work on a book on sex differences in heart disease. And I wrote to them and said, I have a lot of ideas. Here's what I would love to do. Can I work with you? And they realized I had a lot of energy, enthusiasm. They didn't want to do it. And so they said, here, the book is yours. Do what you want. And they got me connected to Elsevier, which is kind of how this all uh, played out. I had sat on the book, if I'm being honest, for 6 months before I said yes to the publisher because I had a full-time job. I had just right around that time joined, well, I guess I joined UW in 2000, University of Wisconsin in 2015. Then my work was quite demanding and busy, and I know how much work it takes to edit and write a manuscript. And I was like, book is gonna have about 28 chapters. I'm not sure I can do that right now. I also knew I was so passionate about the topic, I could not say no. So 6 months later, I found a partner in crime, Melissa Wood, and we decided to co-edit the book together. And that's the book that was referred to. So a lot of the power, in addition to education, is dissemination. So the nice thing was it allowed all of these leadership opportunities allowed me to take my voice and put them at a much bigger platform. And I could actually disseminate the nuclear cardiology and women's heart disease science through means of GNC. I did some TV interviews and speaking engagements. And then I was also the vice chair of the social media committee through ASNIC, vice chair of the membership committee, and on the ASNIC program committee. And all of those gave me visibility for what I really was passionate and wanted to do. So to me, the important thing about social media is creating your brand and your professional image, and then importantly, finding your passion. For me, it was imaging and women's heart disease, and then it's kind of grown more lately into women in medicine or women in cardiology. So I think it's different things for different people. It can evolve with time, but you do need to work to finding what is important to you. And obviously, I was able to disseminate a lot of my book over social media as well. And there actually are articles that highlight and say that tweets improve the reach of your manuscript and your research work and really help amplify your voice. So we've talked about education, collaboration, dissemination, and a lot of the leadership opportunities that came to me purely through being forced on social media. And I'm going to just do 1 or 2 slides because I don't want someone, I think you guys are all very savvy social media users, but I don't want someone to think it's all hunky-dory and that there are no pitfalls to social media. Many of the truths we cling to depend on our point of view. There are filter algorithms in Twitter where what we see on our account is based on past searches, our behaviors, our location, and who we're following. It helps to further amplify our preconceived beliefs. So basically, we see what we want to see, and quality is not guaranteed. Unless, of course, you're just following the Cardio Nerds account, in which case, just believe everything they say blindly. And there's some science behind it, where there are some psychosocial affects to social media. Sometimes people get carried away in the Twitterverse, but it's important to be grounded and focus on reality. And to me, this is reality for me. And then when I go to a conference, this is my village that has allowed me to be where I am today. My friends that keep me grounded. If I'm having a bad day, I can call them, I can collaborate with them, and do things. And I think as I was reflecting on what message I can give to a lot of you guys that are early in your training, key lessons for me through my career was number one, no task is too small. If in ASNIC 2018, the act of getting on Twitter, if I had said no, I would not be where I am today. The no task is too small. Collaborate both on social media as well as professional societies. And then number three, find your passion. Do what makes it fun. Um, and I'm going to quote Gurleen Kaur, who I think on one of the Cardio Nerds session, I heard her say, consume, contribute, and create. But I'm going to add a little twist to it and say, make sure you have fun doing all of that because life is too short. And I think that is all I have.
Wow, Dr. Aggarwal, that was just so so inspiring. I was left speechless twice today. This time was the second time. The first time was when Ahmed shared his circulation paper, which addressed cardio nerds and their social media presence in the academy. So this was quite the speechless day. Now you were so incredibly insightful. You anticipated three of the questions that I set aside to ask you, namely, what was your anecdotal experience with Twitter? What's the objective data behind it? And how to go about vetting uh, the appropriate sources. But we know CardioNerd is one of them, obviously. So that is all out of my note app. I just want to say that you started your social media journey fairly recently in 2018, so just about 4 years ago, and this relatively brief time, your achievements have been just simply outstanding, to say the least, in both the social media space and outside it. And it was really impressive to see not only your subjective experience, but actually to hear about your journey and also see the objective data that supports the use of social media for education and networking in very much professional setting. Now, this Ahmed asked still on me to moderate, but we have such an incredible group here that I think this discussion is going to moderate itself. So I think it'll be a good time now to hear any questions from anyone.
Thank you, Dina, for those awesome words. Emma, congratulations on your paper. I have not completed it yet, but it looks like a fabulous paper. Truly kudos to the whole group and to you for putting it together.
I think the Cardinals paper really is everyone's paper here, and something that really comes out that we were very deliberate about is as you read it, it very much is about everyone here, the whole community, and so many people who made it what it is. So thank you.
I was going to comment that my personal experience with Twitter was very similar to what you're describing, Dr. Aggarwal. Probably Ahmed remembers when I started off as a fellow, an Academy Cardio Nerds fellow last year. In January, I literally asked Ahmed, I hadn't used Twitter before, like, how do I edit my profile? What am I supposed to put in my description there? How do you create a tweet? And exactly as you're mentioning, I feel like about 6 months in, I had already collaborated on journal clubs, already discussed with Dr. Martha Gulati and received praise on some infographics. So networking, science, also had a lot of fun with studying with Jeeps. I really like that portion that can kind of take a more lighter approach to going through the medical literature. Sometimes for me, it's a breath of fresh air than just browsing journal emails. So I kind of feel like I had a similar experience to what you're describing, Dr. Aggarwal.
Now, I was kind of bouncing off of what you said. I remember meeting Ahmed for the first time in person at ACC, and he told me, somebody stopped me to say that they know me from Twitter. So that that kind of stuck with me. And in fairness, Ahmed is just the most incredible educator. And with him being a resident right now, he might not have had a platform to share this with the world. So we're very, very grateful for Twitter giving us Ahmed at full steam. Ahmed, since I gave you a shout out, do you care sharing with the group
Yeah, sure.
your experience with Twitter?
Yeah, sure. So, I don't think I was mostly a lurker on Twitter, kind of before the academy, before joining the Cardi Nerds Academy. But I think we've all kind of benefited from using Cardi Nerds as the platform, and I think social media, kind of like what you said, Dr. Agrawal, is that there's a lot of pitfalls, but if you focus on just having a mission and having a goal from using that platform, whether it's education, whether it's advocating for your patients or for particular populations, if you stick to that mission, I think that's how you advance on the social media or in the social media space. So I think but it's not just because of me; it's because of the community that Amit and Dan have created, really. And So yeah, that was one of the most memorable experiences that Dino said that people have actually recognized me from Twitter, which is very humbling. And I think I actually have a question for you, Dr. Agrawal. Would be how do you or like what goes into trying to maintain your status on social media? How do you stay um, relevant? How do you stay on top of everything on social media, and how do you maintain your like follower base? Is that, if I could call it that?
Sure. So that's a good question. And I don't know that I have the right answer. And I don't know that there is a right answer. For me, it comes in phases. It always has. I it, that's not necessarily what's recommended. So the recommended strategy is you should be tweeting every day, a few minutes every day on your daily life, and that's how you grow. And there are people like Martha Gulati that tweet like I don't know if she ever puts her phone down. I think she tweets about her dog, she tweets about her walk, and I don't know how she keeps up if she even has a real life. And some people are amazing in doing that. That is not me. When I typically tweet on a day-to-day basis, it's either because something is really passionate that I'm really passionate about and I really want to spread the awareness. Like when I was working on my book, it was something that was near and dear to me. Every day I set the time aside to tweet and share the message. And then there are other and I typically do it just for, 10, 15 minutes at the end of the day. Or if I'm in an elevator or just have some downtime, I may try to do it. Um, but a lot of times where I tweet is, let's say if I'm going to ACC, those are 3 days of pure tweeting and doing some of that. Now, I have to admit, at this last ACC 2022, my favorite or the most common phrase that came out of my mouth was, "Oh, I feel like I already know you, except we've never met in person," because I had just met those people and knew a lot about them through Twitter. And because for the last 2.5 years, I had been missing that physical social interaction, I have to admit, I could not care less about Twitter. I did tweet a little bit, but it was like, nope, this has got to take a backseat. I just want to be there in person because I have learned not to take conferences for granted. And to be honest, I don't know if we're going to have a conference at fall or what life is going to throw our way. And so I have had my moments, but there are other times where if I'm part of ASNIC, so I do have a lot of roles in the American Society of Nuclear Cardiology, I am expected to tweet. And so I do know like the ASNIC conference is coming up in a month. And I have appropriately set aside my social interactions and said, yep, I will be expected to tweet at this conference. And I got to do the right thing and build up the momentum because people are expecting it. I hope that answers your question.
Absolutely, 100%.
Perfect. And then I think I saw a question.
Yeah, there are multiple questions in the chat. I think the first one was by Jesse, and that's something very similar to what I wanted to ask, and I think pertinent to people who are currently in the fellowship application cycle, and maybe even for residency as well. How do you describe your work on Twitter to individuals who are less familiar with the academic utilities of social media? And if I can add on that, how do you talk about it on your interviews, especially with people who haven't been using Twitter? And how do you prove the academic worth of all the work you've put into social media?
That is a really good question. For a lot of people that are not familiar with Twitter or the power of social media, there's nothing you can say to them that will convince them. They have these dark colored glasses on, and I'm being totally candid, where they don't understand what Twitter and the power of social media is. They think it's just a waste of time. And my career is living proof that even if I didn't help disseminate the work, I would not be where I am today if it wasn't for my activities on social media. So to me, if they don't get it, that's their loss. But I tend to focus on some of the other things I'm doing. So for instance, uh, I would focus on all the work you guys are doing with cardio nerds, the publications, the education, the collaboration, and although some of you are trainees right now, these are lifelong bonds. These are also, you're going through these training experiences together where one can say, I had a rough day as a day one of chief residency or day one of faculty. And you have somebody to bounce those ideas off, not just in this call, but hopefully you can also know each other well enough to pick up the phone and do that. Where else are you going to get that? Mayo is a huge program. But even within Mayo, you may not choose to talk about your day one because you don't want your co-fellows to know how you feel as a brand new trainee. But in a close-knit group like this, these are lifelong friendships. So, I think you can mention some of the things you're doing, but not everybody's going to get it. I think the true value of that is some of the hidden things where when people see you do good work, you are educating yourself, you're educating your peers, you're staying on top of literature, you are disseminating your work, um, and coming up with new ideas. This is a great forum for collaboration and fostering new ideas.
And if I may make a observation, Dr. Agarwal's talk, obviously we all find that there is intrinsic value in engaging with our colleagues and peers in social media in and of itself, in raising awareness and educating and advocating. But there's also a place of social media where it's a means to an end that we didn't even expect would happen, right? And so, the textbook came out of friendships and relationships from social media. The roles within the journals and ASNA came out of engagement in social media, and so that's actually true for a lot of you. Where, for instance, Ahmed's graphic turned into a book chapter. Devesh's, outreach and some of the things he's been passionate about has turned into several articles collaborating with people he's connected with. I think the journal clubs speak for themselves for things that, you guys have been doing. And then also the circulation paper, I think is valuable in saying that what we've been involved with is education as part of this community. And this is a reference for where the value for that comes from. Again, that's specific to this group. But I think a lot of people have some phenomenal examples of how work and engagement in social media has turned into things that very much are line items in the CV and can become that way. So, I think kind of like when we all met at ACC, it was like, oh my gosh, like we do feel like we've known each other for a long time. Those relationships are very real. So is, the work that can translate out of time spent on social media.
And I'll add similarly, like, so I love teaching on rounds. That's what I was doing in the beginning of fellowship, my first year of fellowship. And then I started creating these like video sort of like montages of different things of echo findings, hemodynamic findings. And it was taking me a long time, but I was creating it for the residents. And then, Dr. Aramikos was like, there's something called Twitter. And I was like, what? And so I started repurposing this stuff for Twitter. And so then my arc was like totally, and I did what you did, Dr. Aggarwal. I just went like eyes deep into Twitter and just like went crazy video after video after video. But then I started feeling exactly what Ahmed's saying. Like without, if you just on social media, it is very good. You're making a splash. You're able to educate people, but there's something about it that's sort of not permanent to it. So the things that I realized that are permanent are the relationships that I started to build, because before Twitter, I would go to a conference and just feel like, like just feel lost in a sea of people, almost like just like a stranger in like Manhattan type of thing. But then after I started connecting with people on social media, like Dr. Mama's Mamas is an example, somebody like across the seas, I bumped into him and like we knew each other, like it was crazy. And the same thing happened in a logarithmic fold when we went to ACC during the last conference, but that became real. So the relationships become real. But then also that's kind of like where I saw, that just felt a calling to do something more, because I was seeing, like, for example, there are a lot of general fellows that were doing a lot of education when they went into interventional fellowship. Their education kind of like tailed off. And I would like ask them like, what happened? And basically they all became so busy. So that's when I realized, like, for me personally, I wanted to do something that was going to be, outlast the years of training that I was doing. So that's kind of like one of my passions that got me interested in cardio nerds in the first place, was to do something that's more than just the social media aspect of it, but to do something that has permanence, and actually adds value to the cardiology field. So like, I completely agree with what everyone's saying. Use social media as a venue to educate, but also always have an eye on how you can create permanence to it, so that it doesn't get washed away in the Twitter feeds, but that you can somehow capitalize on it from either satisfying your personal goals of education, but also your academic goals. So always do that. And you guys, we all are doing that. And I think that that's people who naysay social media, which happens a lot. You'll see, I'm sure like, oh, he's a Twitter person. They don't necessarily see the beauty of you being able to take what you're doing on Twitter and making it permanence, and whether that's changing the way somebody, practices medicine forever, or or basically, being able to write an article, add something to a book chapter, add something to the literature. So it's a huge tool that should be taken advantage of. And I think we are doing a good job at it.
I could not agree more, Dan. And I think I'm going to add two other things as you guys were talking. So, one, there's a skill to tweeting. Not everybody can tweet. It takes a lot of effort to go from a whole article and synthesizing it into a 280 character summary that is meaningful and resonates with people. That is a skill there. So I do think there's some value in it. It teaches you something about editing. I do think my editing has gotten a lot better, having figured out how to make these tweets. Uh, And maybe, when you go on interviews, you guys are doing incredible infographics. Print out a couple of those in color and have them in your portfolio. And when you have an opportunity, feel free to share, and not just, hey, I created one tweet. This is one of the many tweets created. It shows to them you read through the article, synthesize that material, educating your peers. And as we talk about it, it will reflect that you guys are passionate about teaching about the science, education, I guess the dissemination or the marketing aspect of it, and talk about the lifelong collaboration and the value of it. And I will bet you anything, as you go on in your lives, you'll see the value of it. And friends, especially people you can work with in a professional level, are rare to come by. And this is such an amazing resource to make that happen. And then there are, I guess, some institutions. I know Mayo is one of them, where Mayo does place some value in having some tweets or Twitter activity in our CVs, even for academic promotion. It's a pretty small amount, to the point I don't even have a whole lot of Twitter stuff in my CV, and then I'm not going to create a tweet line for every tweet item. That is just not going to happen. I struggle to keep up with Twitter as is, but there is a place if to do that in some institutions.
Those are, oh, sorry, I was just going to add that those are just such wonderful sentiments, and it's important to be mindful how to integrate Twitter in our whole professional persona, rather than it being our professional persona. How to add permanence to it, like Dan said. I absolutely love that comment. Go ahead, Amit. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, that was beautifully said, Dinu. And just another like very tangible and practical strategy for many of the people here is if there's an opportunity to get involved or speak on behalf of a society for scientific sessions on social media, then I think that's a great way to talk about brand building within a specific professional focus that you're interested in. So as an example, Kate crushed it with the ACHD symposium. And I mean, the ACHD faculty were emailing me like, who is this person? And I was like, she's a resident. Like, oh my God, when is she applying? And I was like, no, she's not applying for ACHD fellowship. She's applying for general cardiology. Like, oh my gosh, Pooja is going to be going to, the Sky Shock meeting. Jesse has done this for the Women's Health Symposium. Gurleen has done this really effectively for ACC. Ahmed has done this for THC. So, these are a lot of examples, but I'm telling you, it gets, you do it well, it gets noticed, and it's getting noticed within a professional sphere of colleagues and experts that you're interested to network in. So that's just a very practical way.
Right. I think Pooja had a question.
Thanks for your talk, Dr. Aggarwal. My name is Pooja. I'm a cardiology fellow at OHSU. And I wanted to ask you about, just exploring some of the pitfalls with Twitter. I think one thing is that we're in such a high achieving field. All these people are doing amazing things. I think there is a possibility of this triggering imposter syndrome and us, comparing ourselves to other people. I was wondering if you've had any experience with that or any advice regarding that.
I think the first thing is you are doing amazing work. And if all the stuff that Amit mentioned, this is incredible. I wish I had done this back when I was a trainee. I mean, looking at you guys, I'm going to get imposter syndrome if we keep going at this rate. I don't think you should feel in the slightest like these. And I guess the one other thing I learned in my career, this may sound a little borderline inappropriate, but I'll say it because it's helped me along my career. Everybody is born the same way, and they're all naked, and they all look more or less similar. So even if they're the president of ACC or president of ASNIC or whoever, they may be a big shot. They all kind of look alike. And there's no harm in going up to somebody and saying, hey, I am a cardiology fellow. Here's what I'm interested in, or whatever it is, or striking a conversation. And my experience has been there are some people that will really cherish you for that, and they will value that and spend the time, the 2-3 minutes to talk to you. And there will be some people that do not care about talking to a trainee because they're genuinely busy, like they might literally be rushing to a meeting and just do not have that bandwidth at that moment, or because that's just not their personality. They're lost. It is okay. You'll find people that will value you for who you are. So I don't think you should take Twitter or what you see on social media to feel the imposter syndrome. That's just my take on it. Do other people have other thoughts? I'd love to hear other people's comments on that question. That is a very important question. And I do know that there's a lot of data that people, especially like on Facebook, I don't think I have seen the data for Twitter pertaining to cardiology, but I know on Facebook, people look at friends posting these hunky-dory pictures and feel like life has to be picture perfect. And it does add to some psychosocial implications, which is why I had that cartoon the way I did. So I'd love to hear other people's experiences.
I feel like you're speaking directly to some of the challenges that are not only our generation, but younger generations face as well. What's real and what's social media and what we project, because we don't post when we're tired and we get home from work, or actually on Twitter, there is some honesty. There are people who actually have threads that are very honest and down to earth. And I feel like this is one of the things I really appreciate about Twitter. On Instagram, I don't really see that much honesty all the time, but on Twitter, I see physicians talking about mistakes they've made. I see physicians talking about personal things they're going through in their own lives and their struggles to kind of mix the professional part and the family life. And these are things that speak to me. So these are the things that I've been paying attention to. It's hard for me to understand how people have time to do it all. I look at Dr. Manning's feed, She is an inspiration for me because I feel like she doesn't only speak to the medical professional in me, she speaks to the human in me. And um, I, I find that Twitter has presented a challenge because I see people who post articles and who go to conferences and who receive awards. As you're saying, Dr. Gulati, who also walks with her dog and has dinner with her husband. And I wonder, how do they have time to do it all? And it makes me feel frustrated about it all. But then I see people who are honest and who are discussing their challenges. So it's probably all about who you follow and what tweets you see at one point or another. But in my experience, I feel like what helps most is finding people from my own personal life to get me through imposter syndrome. I don't think Twitter will help me get over imposter syndrome. I think people in real life and friends and colleagues who go through the same challenges are the ones who are going to help me go through imposter syndrome.
Very well said, Theo. And women tend to experience imposter syndrome at a much higher rate than men do. That's a well-known fact. So I think the first step to overcoming imposter syndrome is just recognizing that's an imposter syndrome. I am better than that. I can do it. And all of the mere virtue of the fact that you guys are here, part of this incredible community, you guys are way ahead of the curve. None of you should be having imposter syndrome, period.
So that's going to be a hard concept to fully absorb. I think that's kind of the definition of imposter syndrome. So it won't be easy, but fairness, you're right. I'm looking at this group. They're the most incredible educators, most passionate people I've ever met. Just on that one. So I think all of you, all of us should try and remember that every once in a while. Keep on doing our best. Keep on putting our stuff out there. Imposter syndrome. Thank you for that boost. That's quite a big thing. Now, before our time's up, I want to make sure everybody who has a question gets a chance to ask it. So I think Tommy was next in line.
Hey, Dr. Aggarwal. Sorry, I'm multitasking tonight. I'm a little bit me. I'm one of the I'm a cardiology fellow at Cleveland Clinic, a second-year fellow, and I'm a program director for the academy. And my question has to do with something you mentioned earlier when you were talking regarding echo chambers. And I think one of the really big values of social media is that it allows you to connect with people outside your institution. You can have completely different perspectives and people who live for entirely different worlds that you're in. But you have to balance that with the idea, as you said, everything that you see kind of reinforces what you see going down the road. So how do you use social media as a positive to expand your point of view and get a larger diversity of opinions and approaches to cardiovascular medicine as opposed to being in that echo chamber?
That's a very thought-provoking question, because the more diverse your group is, the more diverse your thoughts are going to be, as long as obviously you're open to different ideas. An institution is more or less going to have, so at Mayo, we're all going to have more or less a similar kind of mindset. So I trained at Mayo, and I'm going to hear more or less the same thoughts because these are the people that trained me. There's only one way to read the echo, and the RV should be on the right side, right? That's how Mayo echo images are, with the RV on the right side on an echo. I know the rest of the world does it the other way around, but we always like to joke and say we do it the right way because that's how we were trained. But until someone else shows you images the other way around, or says, no, here's why we do what we do, you're not going to get that perspective. So actually, I hope I'm answering your question, but the diversity of the group and connecting with different people, and maybe not just with echo and not just with cardiology, even with, hey, how do you do column? And for me, like, we're struggling with how do we, as a faculty, we've got a group of nurse practitioners, and how do we utilize them in our practice? And obviously, within our small group, we've got one opinion. But through Twitter, I can post a poll, I can post a question, I can message some of my closer friends one-on-one and say, hey, how are you guys doing it? That's where you're going to get the diversity of opinions to know how to approach anything in life. Or, I see a patient who is having, a woman who's having unrelenting chest pain. I've done the basic, I've done the cath. I think they've got microvascular disease. I've tried some of the basic drugs, not working. What do I do? What I'm going to do is put a message up in my WhatsApp, in my personal WhatsApp group, or one-on-one, obviously not on Twitter to ensure the HIPAA violation, but message people and say, hey, what would you do in this situation? Obviously, I'm open to different perspectives, and you get a wide array for that need. So I hope, Thomas, I answered your question.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the idea that using the connections you have through social media to just especially when you feel like you're hitting these walls of like, well, this is how we would have done it here, but something's missing. We're not getting, the patient isn't getting what they need, whatever it might be. And just using this as kind of as a way to get a diversity of opinions. Ahmed mentioned the cardioverse in the chat here, which is Rick Ferraro, who's another very involved member at the Cardioverse Academy, had come up with, which is a WhatsApp group of a bunch of different trainees across all sorts of institutions. And it's a similar idea wherein people just say like, hey, how do you manage a shock team call? Or, hey, how do you manage, how do you wean in Impella? Or how do you, whatever your issue of choice is. But it's that kind of collaboration and that kind of just picking out people's brain, I think is something that's so unique to social media. So I think it's trying to get the best of that without getting the echo chamber, which is so important.
But remember also that while you're a trainee at your institution, you still got to follow the institutional norms. So I can't just go out and say, well, the rest of the world does the echo the upside down, and that's how I'm going to do it. I will get fired the next day. So let's not try to do that.
That's very, very fair. Still, the parallel with the cardioverse that Rick is pioneering is a outstanding one. And although we absolutely have to follow our individual institutions' protocols, we learn just from how other people approach it.
It is incredible what you guys are doing. I think you should honestly keep doing it. I can't wait to see what superstars you guys are going to be when you actually become attendees. And I truly mean that from the bottom of my heart.